Hello everyone. In today's lecture, we shift our focus from market structures themselves to how governments monitor and regulate market power, especially when firms grow larger through merger and acquisitions. We will examining how large firms are established and how their size affects competition and how regulators evaluate the degree of competitions in the market. To understand modern regulation, we need to look at history. In the late 19th century, many industries in the United States were dominated by a few very powerful firms organized as trusts. These firms often formed through merger and acquisitions, combining smaller companies into large corporations. Famous examples include Standard Oil, led by John Rockefeller, and major steel companies led by Andrew Carnegie. These firms were able to raise prices for consumers and reduce wages for workers and prevent smaller firms from competing or innovating. Because of these concerns, the US government began developing antitrust laws to limit excessive market power. To control the power of large firms, the United States government passed several major antitrust laws to give government the power to block certain mergers and even in some cases to break large firms into smaller ones. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was the first major law designed to break up trusts and prevent monopolistic practices. The Clayton Antitrust Act of 1914 strengthened these rules by targeting specific behaviors that reduce competition, such as certain mergers and exclusive agreements. The Sadler-Kefauver Act of 1950 further expanded the, the government's ability to prevent mergers that could reduce competition. These laws give regulators the power to block mergers or even break up firms when necessary. Now let's define merger and acquisitions. Firms often expand their size and influence through M&A activities. A merger occurs when two separate firms combine to form a single new firm. An acquisition occurs when one firm purchases another and absorbs it into its operations. Firms pursue M&A for many reasons, such as increasing market share, reducing competition, and improving efficiency. When regulators investigate M&A cases, they need to consider a balance between size and competition. On one hand, large firms can benefit from economies of scale, meaning they can produce goods at lower average cost as production increases. This can lead to lower prices and greater efficiency. On the other hand, when firms merge, the number of competitors decreases. Less competition can lead to higher prices, reduced innovation, and fewer choices for consumers. So regulators must balance two competing goals. They must consider whether merger improves efficiency and lowers costs, or whether it reduces competition and harms consumers. So how do mergers are evaluated? Before a large merger is completed, it must often be reviewed by government agency. Key regulators include the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Communications Commissions, and the U.S. Department of Justice. These agencies can approve the merger, block it, or approve it with conditions. According to the FTC, many mergers actually improve efficiency and benefit consumers. However, some mergers reduce competition, which can lead to higher prices, lower product quality, reduced availability, and less innovation. So each case must be carefully analyzed. Now let's discuss how regulators measure market power. One simple measure is market share, which represents the firm's proportion of total industry sales. Another tool is the four-firm concentration ratio, which adds the market shares of the largest firms, typically the top four. A more detailed measure is Harvindel-Hirschman Index, or HHI. HHI is calculated by summing the scales of each firm's market share. This method gives more weight to larger firms. Regulators use HHI to evaluate market concentration. If HHI is below 1,000, the market is considered competitive and mergers are usually approved. If HHI is between 1,000 and 1,800, the merger may be reviewed more carefully. If HHI is above 1,800, the market is highly concentrated and merger is likely to be challenged. Now let's apply the concentration ratio. We are given four firms with market shares of 50%, 25%, 10%, and 8%. To calculate the full firm concentration ratio, we add these shares. The total is 50 plus 25 plus 10 plus 8 equals 90%. This means the top four firms control 90% of the market. This is a highly concentrated industry. In such markets, regulators become concerned that mergers may reduce competition even further. Now let's calculate the HHI. We scaled each firm's market share and then sum them. For example, 50 squared equals 2,500, 25 squared equals 625, and so on. So now add them. So HHI equals 3,338. Since this value is well above 1,800, the market is highly concentrated. In this case, regulators would likely challenge the merger because it could significantly reduce competition. However, there are limitations of these measures because defining a market is often difficult. If we define a market narrowly, concentration appears high. If we define it broadly, concentration appears lower. Also, two major changes have made market definition more complex. First, technology, especially the internet, allows firms to compete across regions and even globally. Second, globalization means firms compete not just domestically but internationally. So traditional measures may not fully capture modern competition. Because of these challenges, modern antitrust analysis has become more sophisticated. Instead of relying only on concentration measures such as HHI and full firm concentration index, regulators now analyze the specific markets in detail. They estimate demand and supply curves based by firms and build the statistical models using market data. These models help predict how a merger would affect prices, output, and consumer welfare. This approach focuses more on outcomes rather than simple concentration numbers. All right, now let's clarify an important point. Under the US law, monopoly itself is not illegal. What is illegal is certain restrictive practices. Restrictive practices are actions that reduce competition, even if firms do not explicitly agree to raise prices or limit output. These practices may still harm consumers and reduce market efficiency. Let's examine specific practices. Some practices are legal and common. For example, bundling involves selling multiple products together at a lower combined price, such as cable and internet packages. Other practices fall into a gray area. Exclusive dealing may encourage competition among distributors, but it can become problematic if it blocks competitors from accessing the market. Predatory pricing involves setting prices below average variable cost to eliminate competitors. While illegal, it is difficult to prove because firms may argue they are simply competing aggressively. So context matters in determining whether these practices are harmful. Finally, let's look at clearly illegal practices. The most important example is cartel collusion. This occurs when firms agree to fix prices or divide markets. Such agreements directly reduce competition and harm consumers. Because of this, cartel behavior is strongly prohibited under the antitrust laws. Thank you for watching.